Hello. So, I've got a bit of an experiment here. I am going to be testing operating LEDs without any sort of current limiting resistor being driven by a variable voltage source and seeing what kind of results I can achieve. I've already modified this LED strip to remove the resistors and replace them with blobs of solder. So there is no extra resistance between these three groups of three LEDs. So there's three LEDs in series and then three sets in parallel. So the experiment here is set up so that we got a 9-volt power source going into a step-up, step-down converter, which I've already set to an appropriate voltage that I've tested earlier. And then I have the multimeter set up to measure the voltage drop across a single LED. So, let's power it up in a second and see what the results are. Now, everything's all powered up. We have a couple volts coming in from the 9-volt battery, going into the voltage regulator here. It's outputting a pretty stable 9.3 volts, and that corresponds to a 3.16 volt drop across each of the LEDs with no resistors. I've previously measured this to be the voltage drop across these LEDs before I removed the resistor. These were 12-volt strips, and I attached the 12-volt source to them. I just used this, turned it up to 12 volts, probed the voltage, found it was about 3.1. So I knew that after I did my mod, I could get the LED voltage drop to be the same. Except now, instead of at 12 volts, it's at 9.3 volts. Actually, previously I tested it at about 11 volts, so I had some headroom here. But these LEDs are hardly warm, the voltage is very stable, and all the LEDs appear to be pretty evenly lit, which is something I heard were concerned about, as the variance in manufacturing between individual LEDs could cause them to have a slightly different forward voltage drop, making them brighter compared to others when operated without a resistor. But that doesn't appear to be the case with a real small sample size of just 9 LEDs. Overall, I'd say this is a pretty good success here. When you're adjusting the voltage on your voltage regulator, you have to be very careful, as the current drawn by the LEDs increases exponentially with voltage. So another 0.1 or 0.2 volts here could be 6 times the power usage. And I'd say these are about, like, I don't know, 70% of what I could run them at, because they're hardly warm, you can barely feel it. But overall, with a carefully regulated voltage source that you adjust yourself, I'd say you can get at least decent results without any form of resistor on some LEDs. Now, what has to be determined is whether or not there's any kind of voltage drift in the regulator or voltage drift in the LEDs as they heat up, as that could cause a change in forward voltage drop in current used and a change in voltage output from the regulator. But I've done this test over a period of an hour, and it's exactly the same output voltage on both measurements. So there's no immediate disaster waiting to happen as far as I can tell here. Now, I do have to say, I did want to measure the current being consumed by the LED strip here, but my multimeter seems to have a blown fuse on the current measurement, so that does not work. The next best thing was to just measure the forward voltage drop across the LED, as if you match the forward voltage drop, you'll be matching the current consumed, regardless of whatever your input current is, input voltage is. As long as the voltage across each LED is appropriate, then that's all that matters. Out of curiosity, I measured the voltage drop across each of the LEDs and found that there was a range between 3.1 volts and 3.16. So 0.06 volts difference between these 9 LEDs sitting here. However, that doesn't seem to make any noticeable brightness difference. And since they're in 3 LEDs in series regardless, there's always going to be some variance there, even if the resistor was in place as originally configured. So I don't really feel like a 0.06 volt difference is going to be very significant here, at least compared to what it was originally, which I'm sure was similar. And who knows what the resistances of each of those 3 resistors were anyway, what kind of tolerances they had. So that'll be all for this experiment. I definitely think it was a success, and I was quite interested to find out how it turned out.